Hello, my name's Paul Johnson. I'm the Warden of the Forrest Research Foundation, and I'm here to provide information about the Forrest Foundation Postdoctoral Fellowship Scheme. Applications are currently open, and I'm going to give a run through as to what the Foundation expects, how to put in a good application. Just at the outset, first of all, can I welcome everyone to this meeting, virtual meeting. Just to say that if you have questions, can you please submit them using the Q&A function on Zoom, not the chat function. So we're using the Q&A function for questions, and I'll get to questions at the end after I've just run through some of the detail. And also to let you know that the session is being recorded, and the recording will be available for everyone to access later. So just so that you are aware. So let me begin. I'll say a bit about the Forrest Foundation, about the fellowships, and then about what we expect in a good application, how you can apply to succeed. So let me first of all just go to a presentation. It'll just take me a little while to get this running properly, sorry. Here we go. So the Forrest Research Foundation 2021 postdoctoral fellowships. I'm Paul Johnson. You can see my email address. Just a bit about the foundation. It was established in 2014. Andrew and Nicola Forrest have given $130 million. And that is an endowment fund to support PhD students and postdoctoral fellows. The aim is to support outstanding early career PhD students and early career researchers to conduct their research at any of Western Australia's 5 universities. The PhD studentships and what we're talking about today, the postdoctoral fellowships, are very generous. In fact, some of the most generous research awards available in any country. So not surprisingly, they are in much demand. They can be held at, as I said, any of Western Australia's 5 universities. Though the foundation is managed through and based at UWA, the awards are available for people to either study at or be employed at UWA, Curtin, Murdoch, Edith Cowan, and Notre Dame. So far we've appointed 10 postdoctoral fellows. Of those, 2 are at Curtin, 1 at Murdoch, 1 at Telethon Kids Institute, 6 at UWA. So broadly spread, and we would expect that distribution, that spread, to continue. In 2021, so to commence in 2021, we're offering at least 3 postdoctoral fellowships. I say at least 3. It always does depend a little bit on the quality and type of application that we receive. The fellowships pay a salary at Lecturer A Step 8. That varies marginally across the universities, but it's approximately $95,000 a year. On top of that, we provide an accommodation allowance of $21,000 a year, and we also provide a lump sum relocation and travel and research allowance of $13,000. I should say on top of the salary, we provide the standard university superannuation payment of 17%. So it's a substantial package. The fellowships are for 3 years. We expect, unless there are clear and good reasons otherwise, we expect fellows to be accommodated in Forrest Hall, which is a luxury apartment building with some meeting rooms as well, and some offices on the edge of the Swan River on Matilda Bay, adjacent to the UWA campus. So for postdoc fellows, depending on their circumstances, we provide either large 1-bed or, if they have dependents, 2-bed apartments, all with, as you can see, river views. And we do that. Forrest Hall is located here on the river. We do that because within the Forrest Foundation, we believe that there is great value in building a community of scholars. So the PhD students and the postdoc fellows work on a very, very wide variety of subjects across all disciplines. But what we want to do is create a community of scholars that will engage with and support each other. So you may be working on anthropology, you may be working on physics, you may be working on ecology, but you'll all meet around the coffee machine from time to time. We also run, in fact, the postdoc fellows run fortnightly evening seminars where scholars and fellows give short papers, trying out their ideas, their work, previewing seminar presentations that they may be giving to conferences and workshops. So that degree of both social but also intellectual interaction, we think, is a very important part of the Forrest Foundation commitment to early career research. Let's move on to the detail of the fellowships. They are open to applicants, excuse me, in all subject areas. So, as I say, all subject areas. It could be performing arts, it could be nuclear physics, medicine, chemistry, business. We accept everything. They're also open to applicants of all nationalities. Just at present, with Australia's borders closed, that clearly makes it impossible for international candidates to get here, but the fellowships are to commence in 2021, and they can commence in 2021 at any point in the year. So we would expect borders to be open within 2021 and for international candidates to get here. All appointments are through open competition. There is no pre-allocation to subject area or university or type of candidate. So it's an entirely open competition, and not surprisingly, given the generosity, it's intensely competitive. In previous rounds, and this will be the fourth application round, in previous rounds, the success rate has been only around 2%. So typically 150 to 200 applications. And obviously, many of those applicants are very, very, very good. What, in fact, makes an applicant become a successful holder of a Forrest postdoctoral fellowship? Well, the number one requirement is that they have an outstanding personal research track record. What does that mean? Well, of course, it means that through their research career up to the point of application, so typically their PhD, but possibly a master's and possibly other research experience outside of formal degrees. They have done outstanding work. They've developed a strong publication record. They've probably developed linkages with key researchers in different places. And crucially, their research is making a difference. It is seen to be of significance within their discipline. Successful candidates, as well as having a great track record, are presenting intellectually exciting and innovative research proposals. We don't want people who, having done a PhD, then come along and say, well, I just want another couple of years of doing exactly the same I've done in my PhD. We're prepared to support people who are doing risky research that may not succeed, because very often, if you're working at the boundary of knowledge, at the frontier of a discipline, you have to take risks. So we want research that is intellectually exciting, as it says here, that will be different, that will stand out from the crowd of research that's undertaken by other postdoctoral fellows and early career researchers. We want people who are keen to share ideas, keen to work with others. Sharing ideas is important because no one, no matter how smart they are, will be able to do great research just by drawing on their own brain power. we all need to share ideas. We all need to get inspiration from elsewhere. So sharing ideas, having an ability to work with others, being a successful research collaborator is important. And having excellent communication skills. Great thoughts and great ideas that aren't shared are useless because they have no impact on the discipline, they don't get published, they have no impact on the wider world. So we look for fellows who are able to effectively communicate the core of their research. That research may be, and usually is, intensely detailed, complex, and specific, but it should be possible for the postdoc fellow to communicate the core of that research to any interested party. Those are the attributes of the fellow. What makes an ideal fellowship application? In the application, we ask everyone to present a research proposal written in non-technical language. It's crucial that the research proposal is not dumbed down, but it needs to be made accessible to non-experts. It's quite a challenge to do that in a couple of pages, in 750 words or so. Excuse me. But that is something that needs to be done. The selection panel is always a I should say, is generally, for each applicant, a non-expert panel. So it's made up of a collection of academics, one or more representatives from the Minderoo Foundation, who provided the funding, very often Andrew or Nicola Forrest, and some community representatives from outside of academia, but people with considerable knowledge of academia and research experience. But if you are a mathematician, it is likely that there will be no mathematician on the interview panel. If you're a chemist, it's likely that there will be no chemist, but there will be people who are very smart. There will always be at least 2 deputy vice chancellors research from the WA universities, people who are used to assessing research proposals. So it needs to be, the research proposal needs to be written clearly and in an accessible way. Excuse me. The proposal needs to show how the research is going to be innovative, how it pushes at boundaries. It needs to make that clear, and it needs to be credible in terms of the case it makes for it being innovative. We do want to be supporting research that goes beyond the usual, the standard, the norm within any discipline. And we also want the application to explain why this research will be of significance. To say, well, this particular issue or problem needs to be explored because there's a lot we don't know about it, is not terribly persuasive. There is an infinity of things that we do not know, but the world will go on quite happily not knowing about most of that infinity of things. But there are some things about which it is really important that we know more. Just at present, for instance, it's vitally important that the world knows more about how to form or create a virus against COVID-19. And that's much, much more important than, for instance, creating a vaccine against some completely innocuous infection. So significance, both within the discipline, what are the intellectual developments within your discipline that will leverage off your research, and then what is the impact beyond the discipline? That needs to be spelled out in the application. So how should people apply? Applicants need to ask themselves and their supervisor, am I one of the very best PhD graduates? Am I in the top 5% of PhD graduates from the last 5 years? And that question needs to be asked quite seriously, because if you're not, it's probably best that you don't spend your time putting in an application. With around a 2% success rate, any run-of-the-mill applicants and run-of-the-mill applications will not succeed, and they simply waste people's time. We're not seeking more applications, we seek only the very best candidates and their applications. So ask yourself that question. Am I a credible applicant in this intensely competitive competition? Then make sure, if you have decided, yes, I am a credible applicant, make sure the evidence in your CV sustains this claim. If the norm for a PhD, for someone who's just finished a PhD in your discipline is to have maybe 7 or 8 or 9 publications, 3 of which would be in journals, leading journals in your field, and you have only 2 publications, then your CV won't sustain the claim that you're part of the top 5%. So to be able to, for your CV to sustain the claim, you need to know what the norms are in your discipline, and you need to have a frank conversation with your supervisor or other mentors about it. Thirdly, you need to develop your own innovative research proposal. And let me stress, we're looking for your own proposal. We are trying to assess the personal intellectual capability and potential of each applicant. We're not assessing the supervisor's potential or indeed performance. Within a PhD, most students begin being highly reliant on their supervisor, their laboratory leader, or other senior academic. By the end of the PhD, the PhD graduate should be making their own decisions about their own research, carving out their own distinct intellectual pathway. And that's what we look for in the application. All applicants need to nominate a senior academic mentor, someone who has a considerable experience of supporting early career researchers, helping them develop their academic profile, their research leadership. And the proposal needs to be discussed with a senior academic mentor. That person is often a laboratory or research group leader. But as I say, the research proposal needs to be the applicant's own. And then every applicant is asked an explicit question: is your proposed research supported by your proposed host department or research group? That's very important because the host department or research group is going to have to provide the office space, laboratory space, IT support, and so on. And if they don't provide it, of course, the fellowship application won't be successful. So those are things that need to be done. The selection process then runs as follows. Applicants have to nominate, of course, the research group in the university to which they are applying. Each university examines the applicants it's received and produces a long list of its applications. The top 25%, the top 25 or so applications are then reviewed by a shortlisting panel of the selection committee, and a small number of candidates are shortlisted for interview. The selection committee, which isn't expert in all the disciplines of the candidates, seeks expert evaluations from nominated referees, mentors, and also independent subject experts. So we seek a wide variety of evaluations as to academic performance and potential. And all candidates, all shortlisted candidates are interviewed, ideally in person, but if that's not possible, then by video link. This year, applications close at 11 PM on Monday, the 1st of June. Shortlisting takes place in mid-July. Interviews we anticipate will be in late July, and successful candidates will be informed very, very shortly afterwards. And the fellowships are available for commencement from the 1st of January, but as I say, can be taken up at any point in 2021. All applications have to be submitted through the web application portal, which you can find at the Forrest Foundation website, forestresearch.org.au. If you would like further information, excuse me, I'm here. Drop me an email and I can respond, or contact the admin address at Forrest Research. So that's a quick run through of what we're looking for, what we're expecting in terms of applicants. These are, as I say, extremely generous, much sought after research fellowships, and we are looking forward to having a great field of very highly qualified applicants. So that's a quick run through from me. I'll just turn to some of the questions that have come in. So the first is, if international candidates are successful, is there a contingency if they're not able to travel in 2021? Well, of course, we hope they will be able to travel, but yes, we would hold the fellowship over until 2022. We do actually have one of the candidates, one of the fellowship applicants who we appointed last year, who was due to commence in May of this year, coming from Germany, and she is currently, of course, stuck in Germany and can't get here, and her fellowship is held open until she can get here. So a question about what employment on costs are funded by the scheme. So we provide funding for superannuation. We provide funding for payroll costs, but otherwise costs are borne by the university in pretty much the same way that they are with ARC or NHMRC fellowships. Let me just spin down to other questions. Do we take account of career interruptions when considering a person's track record? Yes, we do, and we follow the ARC practice, which is set out in the guidelines for ARC fellowship. So we take account of career interruptions, typically up to a 2-year interruption for maternity, for instance, which tends to be the major one, but there are other reasons for career interruptions. And I would always ask candidates to be clear about career interruptions and to contact me if they want more information about that. Another question is, can the academic mentor be different to the lab supervisor? Yes, they certainly can. The academic mentor needs to be, as I said, a senior academic. Part of their role is to provide guidance, to provide linkages to national and international research networks. They may not be the person who is running a particular laboratory, but you would expect that they would have fairly detailed knowledge of the broad discipline in which someone is working and how best to advance a career within that discipline. Excuse me again. And I should say that one of the other things we do within the Forrest Foundation is we bring in visiting fellows, absent COVID-19, typically 40 to 45 visiting fellows a year, and we support workshops, and we work to ensure that fellows and PhD scholars are engaged with these international visitors we bring in, so that they can begin to build international research networks. Those networks are terribly important for early career researchers as they develop their career. Another question is how we assess industry experiences, especially highly industry-oriented research topics. With all applicants, where we are seeking evaluations about performance and potential, we turn both to nominated referees who may be from industry rather than academia, and we turn to external experts where we go out and seek additional information. The key thing about industry experience is that, of course, it needs to be related to the work that the proposed research that a candidate is doing. And the research needs to be needs to clearly be of the highest standard when it comes to academic research. Some high standard academic research is very focused on being linked into industry, and other research is not at all linked into industry, and we don't have a particular view about that, or I should say the selection committee doesn't have a particular view about that. It does, however, want that research to be of a very high quality. But there is no particular, just as there's no particular view that the selection committee has about what discipline should be supported, nor is there any view about whether it should be applied or pure research, whether it should be industry related or entirely academic based. So that's all to do with the quality of the application. I should also say that in previous years, there has been what I would call an embarrassment of riches in terms of the applications. And had we had 10 or 12 or 15 fellowships to award, we could have awarded those fellowships to outstanding candidates. So we have consistently had to turn down candidates who are of an outstanding quality and who have gone on to receive postdoctoral fellowships and other postdoctoral employment from elsewhere. Alas, funds are always in short supply. So another question is about the impact of COVID-19 on PhD progression, and pointing out that many PhDs may be subject to delay, and we require PhD completion by 31st of December 2020. So what happens if completion is delayed? An interesting and important question. So let me respond first with a little bit of information about people that we've appointed to these fellowships in the past, and then about current circumstances. Because these are such attractive and highly sought after fellowships, even though the window of eligibility is quite narrow, so really having completed a PhD in the last 2 years, so since January, 1st of January 2018, for this year's round, what we found in the past is that in almost all cases of those that we've appointed in the past, they have already had postdoctoral experience before moving to a Forrest fellowship. We have certainly interviewed people who have been just finishing a PhD, but very often it is those that have had a little bit more postdoctoral experience who win in this competition. That's not to say that we won't countenance people who are just finishing off and intend to finish by the end of the year. For this year, circumstances are of course changing. I would say that candidates need to be very close to submitting their PhD and have a clear and agreed program to submit their PhD by September to fit within the eligibility timetable that we have. If they can't complete by the 31st of December, then they would need to apply for next year's round. I should say, we are thinking within the Forrest Foundation, I can't give details at present, but I am working with governors around some other funding opportunities for newly minted PhDs, because within the foundation we recognise that COVID-19, by reducing the discretionary funding available to universities both in Australia and around the world, is leading to a suspension of new hiring for newly graduated PhDs, and we're working to see if we can develop something separate from our standard postdoc fellowships that may be targeted quite specifically over the next 18 months at this cohort. It's as it were, a single cohort of completing PhD students who are particularly adversely affected by the financial outcome of COVID-19. And I hope to be getting some information out about that in the next month. But for this fellowship scheme, I think we are saying you need to have completed the PhD by the 31st of December. I think everyone needs to give maybe a 3-month period to get it examined, so it's really got to be submitted by September, which means by now it's got to be pretty close to being fully completed. Another question, could I give some detail about the personal reference required in the application? Excuse me. So the key references are academic references. We suggest that candidates may wish to provide a personal reference, so this is not an academic, but if we're particularly conscious of the fact that we have applicants who have done many things outside of their research and their time in universities, and sometimes they wish to draw on that experience in terms of references. So they may have had time out doing things that are completely unrelated to their research, but which are important in terms of providing a comprehensive view, I suppose, of the person, the character, the personality of the applicant. So in terms of personal references, when we're not asking for the reference from mum or dad or granny or best mate who you have a beer with on a Friday evening. But it might, for instance, and I think of one of the current postdoctoral fellows who, after completing their honours year, spent some time working in a couple of different areas, including time working with the United Nations on disaster relief. And that provided an opportunity for a personal reference from a senior United Nations person that gave a different view, a different insight into both the personality and the capabilities of that candidate. So those are the sorts of, that's the sort of information that one might wish to draw forward in a personal reference. Let me see if I have other questions. Regarding COVID-19, would there be any favour towards students currently in WA universities? I think actually that depends on the state of applications this year. Typically, the great majority of applications are international. Overall, in the Forrest Foundation, we have, across both the scholarships and the fellowships, we have typically appointed about 70% international and 30% Australian applicants. There's been no quota, that's not been by design, but that's how it's panned out. Whether it will be the same this year, I really don't know, because I just don't know whether COVID-19 will lead international candidates to to not apply because of their concern about travel bans and and the general disruption COVID-19 is creating. But we're not particularly saying that there will be additional focus on WA candidates this year. That may turn out to be the case, but we'll wait and see how the applications turn out. There's a question about success rates. Is the success rate of overseas applicants different to those of domestic applicants? No, they're about the same. We have a majority of overseas, in the past we've had a majority of overseas applications, and we've had, as I say, about 70% currently of the 10 postdoctoral fellows we have appointed. 7 are international and 3 are Australian. So that's more or less in line with the state of the applications. I'm still scanning through questions. A question: is there any way to contact the fellow members of the Forrest Foundation to know more about their research and personal experience? Absolutely. If you go to the Forrest Foundation website, you'll see under the fellowship section of the website, if you click on the button, I think it says Our Fellows, and there will be pictures of the 9 who are currently in residence. As I say, one of those 10 we've appointed is still in Germany and can't get here at present. You can send them an email, indeed many of them have sent me that people are already in touch with them to get more information. I would strongly recommend that, because the best way to find out what life is like in Forrest Hall as a Forrest Fellow is to talk to those who are already in that position. And let me again just question: how detailed should the proposal be in terms of how many specific types of this research or that research, these studies, those studies that should be there? Well, the answer to that is you have on the application form 750 words to write about your research, to write your research proposal for in a non-technical way. A further 250 words, so in total 1,000, to explain what your past research has been and how it has brought you to the point where you're now proposing this current research proposal. It's for each applicant to determine how best to use that space to present their intended research. What I would say is, and I say this because of a number of conversations I've had with current postdoc fellows around the requirements that the ARC has for ARC DECRA applications. Those applications, if you're applying for an ARC fellowship, you have to go through in great detail your research design, your research methodology, the experiment, if you're working in experimental science, the nature of the experiments, the phasing of them, how they'll be constructed, analyzed, and so on. But you have a lot of space to do that. This application allows you to present the outline and the purpose and the outline of the method, but not to go into the detail. We anticipate that successful candidates will already have published enough, that there will be enough in the public domain for us to seek other assurances about what I would call the professional competence of the candidate. And of course, we turn to external referees for that too. So it's it's a different sort of application to that which would be required of an ARC DECRA application. Another question. In proposing a project to be conducted in the same department that you've done your PhD in, does that affect the evaluation of the application? No, but let me provide the following guidance. We are looking for people who have already produced research of a very, very high standard. And that is demonstrated in a number of ways. So there will be publications, and those publications will be probably in highly rated journals. We particularly take note if candidates have published with people who are not directly connected with their current location. That is, people who are not their PhD supervisors and part of their local research group. We're interested in that because if someone as a PhD student has published with people from outside of their own research group, it's an indication, not foolproof, but it is an indication that some other group with whom they're not deeply or intimately connected and that has no particular responsibility to that person has invited them to collaborate because that person is able to offer something in terms of their skills, their intellectual capability, which provides added value. So it's a sign that this candidate is exceptional. In other indications that people have been invited to spend time in other laboratories as visitors to other laboratories, that they've been invited to give or possibly to even to convene sessions at international conferences. So we're looking for all those sorts of things because it's quite difficult for someone who has who hasn't published widely, who hasn't worked with people outside of their own research group, who hasn't participated in at an international level in the discourse within their discipline. Quite difficult for them to demonstrate that they are operating at an international level in terms of the quality of their research. So you need to think. So it's not about whether you want to continue in the same department as where you've done your PhD. It's about what else you have done that can show that you have a genuinely, I suppose, a genuinely well-connected, well-understood, well-appreciated intellectual profile that's visible beyond your local community. Another question, is there any specific template for the CV which is attached to the web application? No, there's no particular template, and I say there isn't, and that we quite deliberately so, because conventions in different disciplines vary so widely, and we don't want to get people to waste time converting a perfectly good CV that they have in one style into a different style just for the purposes of this application. So we're more than happy to look at and read CVs that are presented in different styles. Medics and historians, for instance, use very different styles for CVs. What I would say is, a CV needs to be clearly structured. It needs to be to the point. It does need to include publications and other academic experience, and it should also obviously identify qualifications, places of study, and so on, and prizes, awards, and the like. A CV is a place to some extent, which a CV is to some extent just a record of what's been done, but it is also an opportunity to some degree for you to sell yourself, to emphasize the things that you want, that you really want the selection committee to take notice of. An important question is about humanities projects and the fact that at present all the Forrest Fellows are in STEM disciplines, if we include psychology in that. This is not by design, it's accidental. And in this will be the 4th round of fellowship applications. In the first round, we made an offer to an applicant who was working in cultural studies, but they received a very attractive counter offer from their current university, and they decided to stay there. In the second round, we had a runner-up, because we always have a runner-up in case someone turns an offer down, as has happened. And the runner-up was a medieval historian. In fact, they've gone on to a competitive postdoctoral fellowship elsewhere. So we have no, as I say, no bias for or against any particular discipline or subject area. However, I have a comment about humanities applications. This is a general comment, and I hope it will be, I'm offering it in what I hope will be a helpful way. There has been a trend within the humanities over several decades for humanities scholars to present their research in quite a self-referential way, explaining how their particular view of whatever it is they're studying is of value in part because of how it helps them conceptualize their view of the world. That's all very good, but the selection committee will ask of every candidate, why should we spend close to $500,000 supporting you over the next 3 years? And therefore, every applicant needs to make clear why their research will be of value to their discipline and, where appropriate, beyond their discipline. So, for example, it is useful, the foundation has no particular view about applied or basic research. But in writing an application in a non-technical way for a non-expert selection panel of very smart people, it's important to make clear why this research needs to be done and why it will be of value. Let me give a couple of examples. Someone working on modeling the collision trajectories of subatomic particles. Not obviously immediately relevant, applied to anything or anyone other than the interests of particle physicists. But there are some points of connection between that highly technical and relatively abstruse research and, for instance, the underlying research that will need to be carried forward if the world is ever to have effective and controllable nuclear fusion reactors. The research was not on nuclear fusion reactors, but the applicant managed to draw, could point out how the research in 10, 20, 30 years' time might be used. And it allowed the selection committee to get an insight into why this research really needed to be done. But the selection committee could not probe into the mathematics and physics the application. In another case, an applicant in medieval history, who, as I mentioned, was runner-up in an earlier competition, was working on doing a deeply academic study of slavery in a part of medieval Europe. But in discussing this, both in the application and particularly in the interview, drew some links and parallels between medieval slavery, the slave trade at that time, and then the transatlantic slave trade, and then the more recent challenge of the pattern of modern slavery that ends up producing the $9.99 t-shirt for sale in Target through exploited labor in Bangladesh. The research was just about medieval history, but the candidate managed to draw links between that research and other, both academic and contemporary, academic, historical and contemporary issues that helped the selection committee both see the relationship of the present to the past and the past to the present. And that was quite important to, I suppose, activate this historical project in the eyes and minds of the selectors, who could then see that if supported, this would not only be a contribution to that particular area of medieval cultural political history, but could also actually influence the way in which people think and talk about and discuss aspects of slavery that are still current in the modern world. So absolutely, we want historical, we want people working in history, in literature, in classics, in performing arts. We want such people to apply, but they need, when applying, they need to always have in the back of their mind the fact they're going to be asked the question, why should we spend $450,000 supporting you to do this research? And we can see there's a lot of value in it for you. What value is in it for us? So that's the way in which the thinking of the committee often moves. Can I comment on how much of the final score of the application is weighted towards the research proposal versus other elements of the application? I think with any research fellowship proposal, whether it's a DECRA application to the ARC or to the Forrest Foundation, it's a combination of the two. ARC has formal weightings, the profile of the candidate versus the project. The Forrest Foundation doesn't have formal weighting. So in terms of the final score, it's not done on a tick box basis. What I can say is there needs to be a very convincing proposal, and there needs to be a great personal research track record. Though the candidates who are shortlisted will always have both of those, but possibly in slightly different different weights. Again, that often varies by discipline. So, you know, if someone is working in, say, performing arts related areas, if someone is a musicologist, then probably the personal track record, or it may be the personal track record will get a slightly larger weight than the research proposal record. But ultimately it's for the committee to judge that. Question, are international applicants who got their PhD from Australian universities still regarded as international or domestic? We would regard them as international because we look at nationality. Though, of course, if they are by origin like myself, I'm originally from the UK, but I'm now an Australian citizen. Were I to be applying, I would be regarded as Australian. The significance of being an international applicant, that is not an Australian or New Zealand citizen or permanent resident, is that in order to take up the fellowship, you need to have an employment visa, and that's typically a 482 temporary skills shortage visa. If you're an international candidate and you are one of the successful candidates, then you have about 6 weeks, between 4 and 6 weeks from the date at which you would be offered the fellowship to accept the fellowship and submit an application for a visa. And the employing university, one of those 5 WA universities, would and their HR department would assist in making sure that you get that application in on time. Once the application has been submitted, then you still have time to get various documents together to support the application. But there is a process for international candidates around the visa that doesn't exist for permanent residents and citizens. But as far as the foundation is concerned, we take no account of that. We take no account, and the selection committee takes no account of whether you're Australian or international. We just want to evaluate people according to the very best, the very best type of application. Someone has asked about career breaks. Does career as working as teaching only count? And that is often a little ambiguous. I think the questioner says this counts as a career break as far as the ARC is concerned. We've tried to follow ARC rules. Teaching career breaks are sometimes difficult to evaluate because sometimes a teaching role in the university, if it's in a university, also allows the holder of that teaching post to actually continue with research. So it just needs to be clearly articulated in the application. I'm always very happy to talk to people if they have questions. Can the mentor be a former PhD supervisor? Yes. There's no problem about that. And I'm just seeing, I'm also conscious of time, and we're about to finish our 1 hour session. So I'm just seeing if other questions have risen to the top of the list. And, alas, I now can't do that because for some reason my mouse has stopped working. So, so at this point, I think I'll say if there are other questions which I've been unable to answer or haven't got round to, do please just get in touch, drop me an email, and I'll endeavour to respond to them pretty much straight away. As I say, this session is being recorded, will go out, so can be viewed online for those who've missed it. And I look forward to, or I encourage everyone who is sees themselves as a strong contender to work on their application, make sure it is submitted by the 1st of June. These are exceptionally generous fellowships, and we want to make sure that we support the very best candidates who come forward. So thank you all very much for joining this session. Given that my computer has now, the keyboard and mouse have completely frozen, I'll say thank you, and I'll close the session now. Goodbye.